And we're back. I apologize, guys. It looks like my phone ran out of storage. So anyway, I believe we left off at the idea of transition. So I was transitioning to the actual theory and philosophy surrounding money. And what I would like to point out to you guys, regardless of kind of whether we realize it or not, is I would submit to you that we have actually a huge bias against money in our current culture, in our current environment, even on the media, etc., etc. What I found interesting is that even in you guys' comments on the discussion, you can see these kind of underpinnings of negativity. Like there's some negativity around money. You guys mentioned that there's a lot of consumerist lifestyle and that kind of thing. I think that kind of really boils down a lot of the comments that we saw, and a lot of it is just kind of intrinsically, you guys intrinsically, when asked to talk about this, went to the negative and said, there's a lot of negativity around it. So you guys even acknowledge that there kind of is this idea of just a negativity around money, that there's this negativity around our view of how the media portrays it. That's just kind of how we look at it. And what's interesting is you guys also mentioned on almost every one of you guys' papers, you mentioned when asked how people get rich, you mentioned this idea of the heir or the heiress who inherited their entire fortune. And I just think that's really interesting because you kind of intrinsically went to, how do people get money? Well, one of the ways is they inherit their fortune, because they're a multimillionaire and they didn't really earn it, et cetera, right? So we intrinsically go, oh, well, yeah, that person really didn't earn it. And that might be true, although that's a very large minority, I would submit to you. But I remember looking at this kind of, this whole thing is actually discussed. Let me back up. This whole idea is discussed in a book called Thou Shalt Prosper by Daniel Lapin. I would highly recommend you guys pick it up. It's called Thou Shalt Prosper by Daniel Lapin. If there's a handful of books that have kind of shaped the course of my life, and I would tell you that this is one of them. So it's really worth you guys picking up if you got some extra time, whether that's in the summer or down the road. I would highly recommend it. Put it on a list. But one of the things he talks about is this idea that we have an intrinsic negativity around money in American culture. And what I found so interesting is that I didn't believe him, right? And then as he kind of talked through this idea, I kind of realized, wow, I do have this kind of intrinsic bias against people with money. I think that it's really interesting to kind of evaluate, and I think I gave that encouragement to one of you guys, if not multiple in the group. It's just like, look at how things are portrayed in the things that you digest, the things that you take in, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, you watch the news, you watch politics, anything like that. You got to look at how they portray people with money. And one of the things that this book did was it said, I bet you that you have an intrinsic bias against money. And I didn't believe them because I'm a pretty money driven individual. I would say that money's something I've always really been interested in. And so I've really kind of pursued that area of my life. And so I said, okay, yeah, I don't have this bias or whatever. And I don't honestly think that the American, people have a bias against this people with money. And one of the things that he talked about that's so interesting and baffles me to this day is he said, all right, if you don't believe me, go look at the villain in almost every TV show or every movie that you watch. And then he goes on to list pages of the movies where the villain is the bad guy is the person with money. And they're always the person with money who's trying to screw over the little guy, or the person with money who got there by being completely evil, right? And so it's just interesting because it's those subtle ideas that really influence our views of money. And I'd like to call them out right here and right now to just say, okay, well, hold on a second. Here's something that we might not have noticed in the past. And I think that there's a lot of them. So please be aware of really what you're taking in. But, I think that it's interesting because, even in the media, a real world example of this that we've seen recently or in the recent past is that this person that has been price gouging people on their, EpiPens, right? That they've upped the price exponentially of these EpiPens and how the person is profiting off of the medical issues of somebody else. And it makes media national headlines. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but it has. And they kind of pump this like, oh, this rich guy is taking advantage of the poor people. And it's not that I don't disagree. It's just very interesting because when a rich person does something that is noteworthy and admirable, I would say I've rarely heard of such a situation, right? That we very intrinsically focus on the negative, and that's what we've given our attention to in relation to money. And so I just want to kind of say, watch this. Really, really open your eyes to this particular situation. And I have a question for you guys, because this is another way that I think that we can kind of debunk this idea of bias around money. What is a dollar? What is a dollar? And it seems like a stupid question, and it kind of is like, okay, Kyle, come on, whatever, right? So let me ask or rephrase the question. How do you get money? Well, you work. Okay. Well, why is somebody willing to pay you for your work? And you should go through these lines of questioning, but eventually at the end, what I think you can realize, and what I would submit to you today, is this, that the reason that money, that a dollar, is a physical representation of the fact that you provided someone a service. That the reason why you have money is because you helped somebody, right? And if you want to make lots of money, then you help lots of people, right? And there's some obvious exceptions to the rule, right? If you stole the money or something like that, yeah, okay. We're not talking about that. But in most cases, even let's propose, even if it's ill-gotten, right? You're a drug dealer. Well, you still provided someone a service. You helped them. Now, you didn't help them in a good way, right? Obviously, somebody shouldn't be helping you get drugs, but they did provide you a service. And that's what most, if not all of the uses and the reasons why you get a dollar, you get money. And the reason why someone is rich is because they help the most people. And I really want you guys to resonate around that fact tonight. Really think about that, because honestly, that realization has been one of the most kind of life-changing, altering things in my life. I mean, there's been many, but man, that one really hit me when I was thinking about that and when I read it in this book. It's like, man, I just don't think that the media or any of us portray money that way anymore. And what I find interesting is you look at, say, one of the richest individuals, if not the richest, I don't know where he sits right now, but Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He owns Amazon, or he was one of the richest up until recently when he got a divorce, right? Let's not split hairs over semantics. But one of the richest people in the world. How much has your life improved because of Amazon? Right? Just think of the pandemic in general. Can you imagine what the pandemic would have looked like if you were not able to order something off Amazon? Okay, we'll take another example. The net worth of Dave Ramsey, the financial guru, is estimated at over $200 million. That is a ton of money. If that doesn't meet your definition of rich, I really don't know what does. But the reality is, why did he get that money? Why does he have that much money? It's because he has taught countless individuals, thousands upon thousands of people, how to responsibly manage their money. And as a result of him helping all of those people, he's become extremely wealthy. So if my encouragement for you tonight, you'll notice that I say that in kind of each one of my classes. I'm hoping that I can keep this theme going. And my encouragement to you guys tonight is figure out how you can help the most people and do that, right? That you have a passion for whatever it is, go and use that passion to help the most people. And I will bet that in most cases, certainly not all, but in many, if not most cases, that will turn into a good living. So if you're wondering what to do or with the rest of your life and how you should kind of move forward after your education, or even right now, think about how can I help the most people and what am I passionate about, right? Because I would submit to you that the way that you can make the most money is by helping the most people. All right, so the other thing that I think is really interesting is how our spiritual lives kind of integrate into this idea of money. So without fail, except for this class, which is kind of interesting, not one of you guys mentioned in any of your responses the verse in Timothy that says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I think that's one of the most accurate translations, and it's interesting because I find it, again, there's this bias against money or against people with a lot of money, right? That when I first read that verse, I thought, oh yeah, the rich person, that this verse is addressing the rich person that says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And I thought, yeah, of course, the rich person, they care too much about money. And what I think is interesting is that verse does not address whether it was poor or rich people that person was primarily talking to. That there's no context there. It's not, yeah, hey, rich people, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's interesting because we immediately think that, but that's not the address. He doesn't say that. It does not say that in the Bible. And so we go, oh yeah, and there's just, again, this just kind of intrinsic bias. But you know what's interesting is as I've began to shape my opinions about money over time, what I've noticed, and I hope that you guys can look at this moving forward, who cares the most about money? Really, who cares the most about money? Who allows it to shape them and mold them the most in their lives and lives and breathes their life for money? I would submit to you that it's not necessarily, not always, certainly, but not necessarily the rich person. In fact, in my own life, what I've seen is that the people who are really ultimately ruled by money, are the poor people. And that realization, I think, might be able to help us be able to see and reframe our view of money. That, that poor people oftentimes are the people that I've seen care that much about money. I've seen very few of the rich that I've been around, and I've been around quite a few, to be honest with you, of people that I would define as extremely wealthy, and they really don't think about money. They don't live their life for money. They don't talk about it. It doesn't dominate their thought process, their actions as much. In fact, what I've noticed is the more money that I've seen people get, and this isn't always the case, but the more money I've seen people get, the less they actually are concerned about money. Now, they're concerned about their work and being good at what they do, but now the money aspect of things becomes secondary to them. It's just, yeah, this is something I get as a product of doing what I love to do, but, it's not the end all. It's not the be all. I do what I want to do because I love what it is that I'm doing, not because of the money necessarily. Now, again, there are exceptions, but that's what I've observed in my own life, and I hope that you guys can observe that in your own lives as well. The last thing that I wanted to address with you guys was, I asked the question, what do you think a rich person looks like? What do we think the stereotypical, how do you get rich? Do they drive a really nice car? Do they have a really high education? Whatever it is. And what I think is interesting is that we tend to think of rich people as somebody who drives a really nice car, has a really nice house, wears really expensive clothes. They, drink snooty wine and coffee. And what's interesting is that we are not alone in that assumption. In fact, in The Millionaire Next Door, they ran a study of those that they would define as extremely wealthy. And what they found was they did these, what do you call that? Like a workshop where they would just sit and ask questions. There's a better word for it, but it's eluding me right now. But they do these workshops where they'd invite all these rich people and just essentially pick their brain about their habits and skills and, how they got to where they were. And they put out all this really expensive wine, the $500 bottles of wine. And they had caviar and just these stereotypical things that you see, rich people like. And what's interesting that they found is that not any of the people that they interviewed touched that kind of food. In fact, they talked to the people that were the richest, and they said, well, what kind of, alcohol do you drink? And they said, Coors Light, basically the cheapest thing that you can find, right? That's what I drink. If you're asking me if I'm a wine connoisseur, and I would never drink a $500 bottle of wine. They asked them in this study, and another book that I would highly encourage you guys picking up is The Millionaire Next Door. They talked about what was the most expensive watch that you've ever bought? What's the most expensive car? What kind of car do you drive? What's your job? What kind of job do you have? And what they found absolutely baffled them in terms of what they actually found this looked like. And what they found was that the person who was the richest never looked like the richest person. They never looked like they had money. They had relatively cheap clothes. They had relatively cheap watches and cars and whatever their habits might be. They might have an expensive habit or so, but most of their lives were extremely simple, easy things. And you know what's interesting is that Dave Ramsey's organization actually did another study on millionaires where they looked at the most common traits, and they come through and do a whole book on it. But one of the things that I found most interesting about this was the three most likely. They did millionaires, just millionaires, anybody with $1 million or above, right? And they said, who are the people who have $1 million, and what is their most common, what job do they have, right? What's their job title? And what they found was absolutely baffling. I want you to think about this just for a quick second. What job descriptions, job titles do you think these people had? What they actually found was that the most common job titles for millionaires are engineer, accountant, and teachers. That's what they found in this study of, I think they did thousands. If I remember right, it's 10,000, but don't quote me on that. You can by all means Google it if you want the exact figure, but it's it's hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people that they pulled, and those were the most common job titles that they found about rich people, which just absolutely baffles us all, because what we think of when we view the rich person is that person on television who's living the most lavish lifestyle that they possibly can, and the reality is that is almost never the case. That is this teeny subset of the actual rich people. And you know the other interesting thing? What they found in The Millionaire Next Door is they did a study on all these millionaires, and then they asked them questions about their kids, about these extremely wealthy individuals, and they asked them about their kids, and if their kids were wealthy, and how that wealth was passed down, and all these questions about the nitty-gritty of their lives. And what they found was that if you wanted to be wealthy, truly wealthy in your life, that you being born in money was actually a detractor from whether or not you would be a millionaire or a multimillionaire or an extremely wealthy person in your adult life. That if you were born into money, usually you didn't keep it. And they mentioned that within 2 generations, usually all the money was gone. And it's absolutely baffling when I read this. This is something I'm obviously passionate and interested about. I hope you guys are too, because it really does affect your lives. But I would really encourage you to kind of keep looking through how this stuff fleshes out in your day-to-day lives, and how money is handled by most individuals. And what I think is interesting about this particular topic, because I'm so passionate about it, is that what's interesting is this idea is echoed so well in the Bible, right? That God says that those who are trusted with little will be trusted with much. And what we look at is we have this picture of the heir or the heiress, and we say, oh yeah, they just were handed their money, and that's the rich person. When in reality, what happens is when you don't earn it, you don't keep it. And the person that has the most money, in fact, one of the things they found in The Millionaire Next Door is they found that the richest individuals were oftentimes, now not always, but disproportionately, they were first-generation immigrants who started with almost nothing. And it just is absolutely amazing to see, because what we see in the Bible is this idea of stewardship, that when God gives you something and you steward it well, that he gives you more. That these people who work extremely hard and they try extremely hard and they commit themselves to excellence, that those people who are trusted with very little and have very little to start eventually grow it and make it larger, and they're able to handle their money adequately because they were given something small that they stewarded and did well with. And so if I can leave you guys with that tonight, that would be great. I'm trying to think. I think that that's going to be it. Again, you guys have a discussion listed. Love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. Please, I'm going to shameless plug here. Please try to get your assignments in beforehand. Looks like a bunch of you guys where there's a mad rush at the end for the discussion, within the last 15 minutes until the due date. Please just post on the discussion a day, 2 days, 3 days before it's actually due so that we can have some actual dialogue around this. If you guys have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. We'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks.